G'day Cephalon Collective and welcome to the week in Warframe news for the week ending 18th of August 2019. I'm Cephalon Greg. Apart from the dev stream, this week was pretty light on news, so I'll also give a brief rundown of the big news from the dev stream. First up, Dog Days ended this week. Whatever you may have felt about it, it's likely to come back, possibly bigger and better next year. The only other news from the week was that the Wukong Collection update has gone into certification for consoles. This includes the Wukong Samadhi Collection, the Takelu weapon skins, the augment changes, and much more. It may be ready by the time you watch this, but if not, keep an eye out on Tuesday or Wednesday. Next up, the dev stream. As with all dev streams, there was a bunch of information crammed in, but I'll give some overviews of the smaller tidbits of info. Tenno Live for Tokyo Game Show in September is already sold out, but expect to see Steve, Rebecca, and Megan there if you have got tickets. Nightwave Series 2 is expected to last about as long as Series 1, which was initially about 10 weeks, but will probably be extended for a couple of weeks and then followed by an intermission. The team is still working on Series 3. There were plenty of other little details, of course, but the important stuff follows. The renders for Equinox and Ivara Deluxe were shown off, and both are looking great. Personally, I wasn't sold on either of them previously, but as they have become more realised, I'm looking forward to seeing them in-game. Can't wait for them to hit the market. Next, the Shorzan. There's been a bunch of development here in the recent weeks, and it's starting to look like a bunch of fun. Not only is there a whammy bar, but you can change scales, several notes, and select from multiple frets. I can see that some people are going to make some awesome stuff with this. Next up, there was more information on Gorse. Sadly, he'll not be shipping at the same time as Grendel, but we did see his signature weapons in action. He has both the primary rifle, the Exceltra, and dual secondary pistols, the Icarius. I'm not sure I saw enough of them to comment, but from the brief exposure they do seem fun. Gorse is expected to ship with the next mainline update. And on to Grendel! His abilities are as follows, but note that the names may change. Feast. Grendel eats enemies in front of him and holds them within him for use by his other abilities. He can eat an unlimited number of enemies at present, but it does drain energy to hold them inside. Nourish. Grendel consumes the enemies inside of him for one of 3 buffs in an aura around him. These buffs were not detailed. Regurgitate. Grendel vomits enemies as projectiles that cause damage. This was hilarious, but I assume it has some other effect as well. And lastly, Meatball. Grendel turns into a ball that can be controlled in all directions by the player, including a jump button. This ball can consume enemies it touches and can gather speed if travelling down a slope. His passive depends on the amount of enemies he eats. The more he eats, the more armour he gets. Overall, I'd say Grendel is looking like a hell of a lot of fun, but sadly he isn't expected very soon. Next up, there were some changes coming to Disruption. To allow this game mode to spread to other areas of the map, Alid V has been selling off his Disruption technology. Expect to see Disruption on Mars, Lua, and Kuva Fortress tilesets in the near future. And lastly, there was Railjack. The team showed off a few disparate things, summarised as follows. The dry dock is quite large, so make sure you have enough room for it in your dojo. There will be a bunch of weapons and ship modules to research. Railjack missions will reward players with mods that can be used as kind of abilities, and these will have varying stats, and some of these will require power management. Railjack weapons will have a linear tech tree and won't have mods like Warframes and weapons currently do, as the team's trying something different. The hireable NPCs on your ship are likely to include the syndicates, and different syndicates will probably have different bonuses. Next up, they showed some abilities. First, there was Shadow Field, which is ship stealthing, and it's not so much of an ability as an augment that can be switched on and off. This had a visual effect and was invisible when outside. It looked really cool. Team then showed off the Tether ability, which can tether enemy ships in space. Enough said, but both look really fun and are making Railjack look much more like a finalised product. Lastly, they showed off a new missile platform out in space. This was clearly a work in progress, but it looked cool nonetheless. Currently, Railjack has no release date, but it will release slowly in parts. The next mainline update is expected at the end of August, and will include the disruption changes, Gauss, and a couple of other things. That about wraps things up for this week's news. Keep an eye out for Cephalon Squared episode 57, in which we go into all of this in a lot more detail. Thank you to our patrons for their support in helping us develop. If you do enjoy our content, head on over to cephalonsquared.com/support. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next week for more Week in Warframe.